Okay, so the Gemara that we're learning, hopefully we'll finish the daf today, the parak, excuse me, today. The daf we're on is Yud Dalet on the base, we're on 14b, and the Gemara that we did on Friday, I just wanted to clarify um, the way we learned it and another way to learn it based on the question that David had asked, which uh, which was a good question. So I'm gonna actually do it inside. So what we're gonna learn is we're gonna start from Bisheni Matin Im Chashecha. Bisheni, we're on page 14b, and Bisheni is about maybe 25 lines from the top. If you have the art scroll, we're gonna start from Bisheni Matin 14b2, the first column, 14b2 on the first column. It's like a new paragraph over there. It's the third paragraph. Okay, so the Gemara that we're going to learn is going to talk about the law of the final 7 days, the final fasts of the 7 day fasts, and the the fact that we are allowed to have stores to some extent opened. And the case here is they're allowed to be opened on Monday and Thursday. But even then, when they're allowed to be open, now Monday and Thursday are the days of the fast days. But even when they're allowed to be opened, there seems to be some limitations to that. And so the Gemara over here says, it brings the Mishnah, and it says, B'sheni matin im chashecha, on Monday, they are partially opened towards evening. Ubachamishi kol hayoim, and on Thursday they're opened all day, not just towards evening. Bibnei kavod Shabbos, because of the honor of Shabbos, in order to honor the Shabbos with food and supplies, a person would be allowed to. You would have the stores would be open and provide you with your needs for Shabbos. So the Gemara says, they asked a question, Heichi katani, how is this learned? How is uh, this statement about Mondays and Thursdays? How is it taught? The base matin im chashecha. Does it mean that on Monday you are allowed to partially open it towards evening? Uvehei kol hayoim, and on Thursday you could partially open it all day. Oh, mipnei kavod Shabbos, because of the honor of Shabbos. So we give you extra time. In other words, instead of it just being towards evening, you actually have the all day, but it's only partially open. So Monday, the doors are partial. You open the door partially, and Thursday you open the door partially. You don't want it fully open, but you partially open it in order for the honor of Shabbos. Dilma, or maybe b'sheni matin, maybe it's on Monday that you partially open the door. And on Thursday, you actually open the door completely. The door of the store, which they used to open completely on the fast days, is where we're dealing with. Maybe it was not. So on Monday, it was not open completely. It was only partially. And maybe on Thursday, the Mishnah leaves it a little vague. So it could mean that on Thursday, the first option was that it was also only partially open, but for much more time. It was like the whole day. Or maybe it means Thursday we open it completely. So Thursday is a much more lenient day because of Kavod Shabbos. They would open it the whole day, and it was open completely the whole day. So it was either just extra time or it was also completely open. So that's the question of the Gemara. And the Gemara says, Toshima, come in here. The Tanya, because we learned in a brisa, the Sheni Matin on the Monday, you partially open it towards evening. And on Thursday, it's Paiskin. It's not Matin, but it's Paiskin. It's completely open the whole day. So it's two things are different than the Monday. On Monday, there was a type of opening that was only partial, and on Thursday, it's complete. And on Monday, it was only towards evening, and on Thursday, it's Kol Yom Kulim Nekavod Shabbos because of the honor of Shabbos. So that's the brisa. And that basically answers our question. because what we just saw is that it's completely open. The Brisa continues, however, and the Brisa says, if it has two doors to the store, and we're going to learn the Rambam's pshat because that's what's brought in Shulchan Aruch. So if the store has two doors, so on Thursday, even though you're allowed to open the door completely, but one door you open and one door you close. In other words, you have two doors, so you don't have to go all the way out and open everything, open both doors. No, one door is enough. We don't have to go crazy. One door, but you open it completely, but you're so even on Thursday, where we allow you to open the door completely, on a fast day, on these very serious fast days, but nevertheless, if you have two doors, keep one locked. What happens if there is some type of a bench or some type of display or something next to a platform by the door, by one of the doors? So then you open it normal, kedarka, like his way. You don't have to worry. You can open both doors. This is the Rambam's strat. It's brought in Shulchan Aruch. It's interesting. There's a whole chapter in Shulchan Aruch about this scenario of the fast for rain. And Eretz Yisrael calls it the fast for rain in Eretz Yisrael. The whole chapter in Shulchan Aruch, and it mentions the pshat of the Rambam. It means that's the pshat. That's the way that it's learned. Now Rashi on the Rif. That means, interestingly, it's not the Rashi. It's not printed in our Gemara here, even though it's generally you assume that it's the same Rashi. They just pulled Rashi's interpretations to the back of the Gemara when the Rif wrote his basically he summarized the final conclusions of summarized the Gemara and only included all the final conclusions of halacha. So normally you think that the Rashi seems to be, they just pulled it, but somehow there seems to be some Rashis that you find over there and you don't find them on the Gemara. And Rashi over there says that he has the way he understands it is if your door is like a lot of doors in our stores or the buildings, they have a double door. So if you have a double door, if you have a double door, and this is talking about on Monday, this is the way Rashi on the Rif learns. If it's a double door, I'm just reading the last paragraph one more time with Rashi's chat. If you have a double door, on Monday, you don't have to only open that partially. You could open one of the doors completely, and the other door stays locked. You open one door completely, and the other door nothing, and that is considered you're partially opening the door. It's partially open, and because you're closing one, you're opening one and you're closing one. And if you have a bench in front of the in front of the door, so it's basically if you have a bench there. This is another case, an alternative situation where you have some type of bench in front of your door. So in that case, you can open the door completely because the bench is also considered like a part. It makes it like you're only opening the door partially because there's a bench there. You open normally completely. You don't have to be concerned. In other words, you don't have to be concerned that you're not opening only partially. You can open completely, and it's not a problem. You don't have to worry. It's not a concern. Now, the way Rashi explains the reason for this whole thing about opening and closing, opening partially, it seems to have something to do with the issue of making other people hungry when they see the food. You should try to minimize the opening, the entrances of the store. Now, the way Rashi on our Gemara here, the way Rashi mentions it, and he says, why do you open the door partially on Monday? Why do you only? So he says, in order that people won't see and become pained. But when it's close to evening, then you open it a little in order for them to have in order to have food. So one of the famous later commentaries called the Shagas Aryeh, the way he understands Rashi is you close the stores all day because why do these stores have to be closed? Because we don't want people to be pained by seeing food. But you open it a little towards evening, in order for they'll have what to eat at night. That would be a reason to open it a little, and then of course on Thursday you open it for Shabbos. But the whole purpose of closing it is basically we don't want people to be, and even when you open it, you only open partially. Basically, we don't want people to be hungry. See the food and cause them to be hungry. Now, according to that, it sounds like other stores that are clothing stores, that are electronic stores, that are all different types of other merchandise type of stores, those don't fall into this whole problem of causing people to be hungry. And therefore, it would seem that Rashi's saying those stores would be allowed to be open. That was the initial way I learned the Gemara. The problem with learning that way is, and this I think was David's question, is that there is a Mishnah, that the Mishnah that we learned on page 12 says you're not allowed to work. These last 7 fasts, it says that even the 3 before it, you were not asur and b'malacha. So of course the last 7 is also prohibited to work. So if you're prohibited to work, it would seem that the other stores are also not going to be open. And these fasts, we learned that even women, as long as they're not pregnant or nursing, they're also fasting. That's what it sounded like. It said pregnant women and nursing women had some type of leniency. We weren't sure which fast they have to do. And the conclusion of the Gemara was that, that the middle 3 is what they fast. But according to the Rambam, it was the last 7 that they fast. But basically, the point is that basically even men and women are all fasting. And so the stores seemingly are all closed. So how would you have a clothing store or a electronic store, whatever other type of stores you have? How would they be opened if people are not allowed to work? So what is how does the Shagas Aryeh understand it? Now, the Shagas Aryeh himself argues on Rashi, so to speak, and he says that it would seem that all the stores are really closed. He sees Rashi implying that all the other stores are open, and he says, I don't understand why Rashi learns that way. Really, all the other stores should be closed, and the only thing about these stores is they're allowed to be open for food. No, the reason why all the stores are closed is because it's a serious fasting. We don't do work. You close all the stores. He doesn't mention this thing about not doing work, actually, in the Shagas Aryeh. He just understands Rashi to be this way, and he says, I'm surprised that Rashi learns that way. He could learn easily that all the stores are all closed, and the only thing is, in order for food, you open it, and maybe you open it before dark, because in order to give food for the Taanis, and in order on Thursday, for Shabbos. But why is Rashi assuming that all the other stores are open and only these food stores are what's closed? So it's interesting. The Mishnah Berurah brings the Shagas Aryeh's insight, and he paskins that way, not like Rashi, not like the Shagas Aryeh understands in Rashi. He paskins that it's prohibited. All the other stores are closed. And food stores, you're allowed to open on Monday partially and on Thursday, completely. But all the other stores have to be closed. That's the way the Mishnah Berurah paskins. And like this Gvura Sari, he even brings it from the Gvura Sari, from this Shagas Aryeh. Now, I was just thinking that maybe this the way that the Shagas Aryeh understands in Rashi, maybe he understood that even if you're not allowed to do work, but maybe your business was allowed to be open, you could have goyish workers there. maybe I'm just it's just a thought that maybe that could be the reason how you could even learn such a thing, because the Mishnah clearly said that you're not allowed to do work. So how would you open up other stores? So I'm just thinking maybe it means that, and that was obviously Shabbos, you can't have a guy working your store, but maybe because of this concept of fasting was really more like a wasn't it's not in it's not a law, it's not menatayra, it's a decree from the rabbis. So maybe there is an option that maybe they only prohibited a yid himself to do work. You can't go into work, but if you have a business open, maybe it would be allowed on the fast days. The fast days have to do with your tshuva. Your business maybe would be allowed to be open. Just a thought. Again, probably the other view would be that it's prohibited, and that's why we close all the stores. But maybe there's room to say that you could learn such a shot that other businesses could be open. Just you're not allowed to go and do work if you have workers there. So I don't know how that would work if it's your shluchim, if they're considered like you're working. It would be it deserves to be looked into if that could be a pshat. But anyway, it seems in Shulchan Aruch, if you want to follow the final halacha, that basically all the other stores would be closed, not like they understood in Rashi. Again, it's a hint from Rashi. It's not so clear, but that's the understanding that maybe Rashi held that way. At least the Retiree sees that. Okay, so then we have that's sort of like concludes this little piece of Gemara with opening the doors on Monday and Thursday, and how much it could be opened, and so on. And now comes the next piece of Gemara. Avru elu v'loi nanu. If these 7 days passed, and they were not, and the Yidden were not answered for rain. In other words, the rain didn't come yet. The matin b'masu v'maton, they minimized their commerce, binyan, v'natiya, and buildings and planting. And Tana, we learned in a brisa, taught in a brisa, binyan shel simcha. Binyan means a building of joy, and Natiya means Natiya shel simcha. Planting means a planting of joy. Means it doesn't mean you're prohibited to build something that's necessary or plant something that's not. We're talking about extras, buildings of joy and plantings of joy. Ezo binyan shel simcha. What is a binyan of simcha? Someone who builds his beis chasnus, the house of a chasan, for his son. Now Rashi translates it to mean that you would make in the house to have his chuppah. So the understanding is that they would make build a house for the son, possibly even to live in, and the chuppah would be done by that house. So that would be the understanding is that if assuming that you have other alternative options, so that would not be allowed. If you have no other place to have the wedding, then that would be a necessity. That wouldn't be like an extra, and that would be allowed. It doesn't say you can't make a wedding. It said you can't build the building of simcha, but of course you could make a wedding. And so this would be that would be a necessity to if you didn't have any other option, so you could build that as well. And now Ezo Natiya shel simcha. What is a planting of simcha? So it says Barnaki shel malachim. This is one who plants a tree of the kings. And what we mentioned on Friday was that they would plant, or a king when he had a son, a prince, they would plant a tree, and that tree they would use later when he became the king. They would use it to build a throne. So that was considered very joyous. When they had a baby, they would do this joyous. This is incredible! We're going to plant a beautiful tree now that we're going to end up using the wood when he takes over. And so it was considered a joyous planting. And so that wouldn't be permitted. Now, how does this refer to other people? We're not talking about just the king. So the thing is that it seems like other people also took on this idea that they would plant a plant when a child was born, when a son was born, and they would plant, and that was like very joyous, in addition to the joy of having a baby. But then they would plant a tree, so that was like a joyous um, planting, and that was not done during these fast until the rain, during these times that the fat didn't rain. It's a sad time. It's a time of tshuva and so on. So it wasn't appropriate to plant these type of plantings. Okay. Then the Gemara says of the She'ilah Shalom, and we also minimize our She'ilah Shalom, our greeting each other. And again, the lashon, the term in the Mishnah on page 12 was we minimize the masu mata, the commerce, binyan and atiyah, the planting and the building and planting, the erisin, ubenisuin, and the engagements and so on, She'ilah Shalom, and in the She'ilah Shalom. 1 second. So it does say be'erisin ubenisuin. Maybe that means that what does that mean? Erisin and Suan. Did they taka not they didn't get married? What did that mean in the Mishnah? Erisin and Suan. They were engaged to get married. They would push off their weddings. What did that mean? Maybe that's what it means. Push off the wedding. I'm just thinking now. That's the literal meaning. One second, I'm going to pull up the Shulchan Aruch. I just want to double check this. Chatkufay and Hay. So here it says in the Shulchan Aruch, chapter 575. This is where it brings down this law. When they fast and the 13 fasts pass, matin, mamasu, matin, binyan shal simcha, we minimize all these things, and says anything done for extra that are extras we minimize, we stop doing, and then it says matin be'erisin of an asuin. And Shein Marsin Klal, they wouldn't get married. Ayin Bir Halacha, he says. Ayin Bir Halacha. They don't have the Bir Halacha. Interesting. So it sounds like they wouldn't get married. So what does this mean? If there was an urgent need, they would. 1 second. If there was an urgent need, so in the laws of Tisha B'Av, where does it say? It says the same thing. From the 9th of Av until the fast of Tisha B'Av, we minimize the commerce. Binyan shel simcha, beis chasnus livnoi, and in any building, and you're only doing it for harvacha. You're only doing it for extras. So you would minimize that. You wouldn't do it. And then it mentions about planting these trees, or now if your wall is about to fall, there's no problem. And even if it's not going to be a sakana, but it's going to cause a loss of money, so you're allowed to build it. And then it says l'tzarech mitzvah, everything's permitted. Like for example, someone who's not married doesn't have a beis chasnus, doesn't have a place to make his wedding, so you would be allowed to, because Medina, even Nesuin is permitted. And this, that we don't have a custom, this is the laws of Tisha B'Av, that even between the 9 days, the laws of the 9 days, that we don't have a minute to get married is because it's not going to be a good simon. It's not like a good, and therefore you're allowed to make a beis chasnus, or to make new clothing if you need it for the wedding. That, or even if the wedding's after Tisha B'Av, you would be allowed to make the clothing now. But if a person already fulfilled the mitzvah of having children, then it would be prohibited. So Medina, according to the letter of the law, it would be permitted to make a wedding even during the 9 days. We don't do it, but nevertheless, you would be allowed to build the wedding hall. So you would be allowed to build. Why would you be allowed to do a wedding? Because you didn't fulfill the mitzvah of having children yet. So the question would be, what would be the din over here with regard to having a wedding if a person doesn't have any children? So it says, unless he hasn't fulfilled the mitzvah of having children. So then you would be allowed to do a wedding. So that's the answer to my question. So it's not wrong. We're right. You minimize weddings, meaning if you already fulfilled the mitzvah of having children, then you would actually push off a wedding. If you didn't have children yet, it's right there in chapter 575 that if a person didn't have children yet, it's right in the Shulchan Aruch actually. If you didn't have children yet, so then you would actually do a wedding during this time that it's not raining. There's no rain. That's what it says. So that's the answer. Okay. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, is this similar to where Yosef stopped having children once the famine started?
Yeah, so we spoke a little about that. Why was that? He didn't have children because he didn't fulfill the mitzvah, really. He didn't have a boy and a girl. So we spoke about that. He was being machmir, but that was the years of famine, right? We touched on that if a person, but that's not regarding having a wedding. That's regarding having children. In other words, here we're talking about you're even allowed to really get married in order to fulfill the mitzvah of having children. There, what we were talking about was, are you allowed to have relations? Not if you're allowed to get married. We're talking about if you're allowed to have relations. Yosef was married already. The question was he allowed to have relations during the years of drought? Was he allowed to have marital relations during the years of drought because the world is suffering and so on? And so the law is that someone who doesn't have children, didn't fulfill the mitzvah, or doesn't have children, can still have marital relations. But here we're talking about making a wedding. So making a wedding, so it says you minimize it, and what that means seems to be that if you have children already, then you don't do weddings during this time when that it hasn't rained. But if you do have children, then you would be allowed to. If you don't have children, then you'd be allowed to make a wedding. Not only that, the binyan shel simcha, to build the hall. So it depends if you have another option or not. But let's say your wedding is afterward. Let's say you have children, and your wedding is going to be in 6 months from now. So there, we're not so worried about the rain. Maybe it'll rain by then, but the problem will be you don't have the hall. So there, you would be allowed to build if you have no other choice. It would seem. If you have no other choice, it's similar to the laws of Tisha B'av. If you have no other choice, you could build it. Or if or if you're going to be having the wedding during this famine, during this drought, because you're allowed to have the wedding. So if you have no other choice, that would be allowed. But if it was it was an act of, it seems like they used to do this as an extra. Like they could have made the wedding hall somewhere else, but they used to like building a special house for the chasana, maybe even live in. Maybe that was like the place where the newlyweds would live. So that was like an extra enjoyment to do that. You don't do that during the if you have another option, you don't do that during the time of drought. Yes, Doug.
Yeah, I had a situation where my mother and she had married my stepfather, and we discovered later on that the chasana took place, and the witness was a relative, so it wasn't a proper wedding. So she was visiting to Toronto from Philadelphia, and it was during the 3 weeks. And I told Rabbi David Shachat the situation, and he said we'll make a chasana now, even though it's the 3 weeks. And they called up like 15 people, and we got together in the shul, and we had a minyan, and they made the chasana during the 3 weeks. Because that was like a sort of a squeeze situation. So I'm thinking that this might have been similar to this.
Right. Right. Well, it's a similar idea. No, it's an opportunity. You got to grab it. So it's a b'diavad, to the person, right? If the person hasn't fulfilled the mitzvah of having children, they can't push it off. You never know. At a certain age, it's going to be too late. So,
Right.
sure.
Well, that wasn't the issue. The issue was like grab
I'm just saying, have a
grab the
kosher
opportunity now to make a kosher wedding, right?
Right. I'm saying you're not going to have another opportunity. You
Right.
get them when someone says yes, you got to grab it. So okay, so the next Gemara is about She'ilah Shalom, the She'ilah Shalom, and in greeting each other. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa. Chaverim ein She'ilah Shalom b'neihem. Among the Torah scholars, Chaverim, among the scholars, so it says they don't do greetings at all. No greetings. It's interesting. The word chaver is often used for a person who follows the laws, and we don't have to worry about them regarding demai, regarding taking their tithings. It's called the term is a chaver, a friend. Literally, it means a friend, but it means they keep the laws of not just the Meiser laws, also the laws of Tumah. Really, they keep the laws of Tumah and Tahara, and so they're careful to be pure, and they tithe. So so that's considered a chaver. That's the term is used, but it basically refers to scholars, and so it says that by them, you're not allowed to say hello to each other. It's like a time of mourning almost. No rain, and we're supposed to be involved, reflecting on our actions and our that Hashem is punishing us and so on. Amei haaretz shashoyalin. Now, what happens when a regular individual, a commoner, that asks and greets you, says hello, how are you? Machzirin lahem. You answer them b'safa rafa, with a soft voice, with a kaved reish, with a heavy head. A heavy head means the opposite of lightheadedness, more seriousness and solemnness. Solemn. Vehein mesatvin v'yoshvin ka'avelim u'chumenudim. And these scholars, they're supposed to be mesatev. Mesatev means they wrap themselves like avelin and menudim, like people who are in mourning or excommunicated. And what that refers to is that doesn't nowadays, people who are mourning, they don't wrap themselves in a some type of a cloak that would cover their face and cover their eyes and so on. But officially, the halacha was that you were supposed to be that, well, it brought by the laws of Mitzayra, a person who has leprosy, that he's Baal Safam Yata, they cover themselves to their mustache. And the law of Avelos is learned from the law of Avelos, of mourning, is learned from the laws of leprosy, and that the same thing would be applied to Avelos. But again, it's not practiced today, and there's reasons for it. Now, and the other thing is the misatfin v'yoshvin, they wrap themselves and they sit like mourners, kivnei adam hanazufim lamakim, like people who have been rejected or rebuked from Hashem, and ad sheyirachmu aleim min hashamayim, until Hashem shows His mercy on them from heaven. So that's the law regarding greeting each other, and that's based on the it's explained. And the Mishnah says v'she'ilah shalom. It says we minimize, so it explains. And it's like people who are nezufim lamakoim, people who are rebuked by Hashem, and to what extent do we not greet each other? So it depends. You don't just ignore someone if they say hello because they don't know any better, but you have to answer them with a more serious and a more very soft and more solemn. Amar Rabbi Elazar says, a person who's important, prominent person is not allowed to fall on his face, literally, which means they would type of prostrating oneself while davening. We don't find it nowadays, but there was a concept of different ways of bowing to Hashem, davening in that position. And it says a important person, a prominent person, is not allowed to do that. Ella imkein nanek Yeshua ben Nun, unless he is someone who could be answered like Yeshua ben Nun, who's in the same league, on a level of Yeshua ben Nun. Otherwise, you shouldn't do it. Rashi tells us the reason over here. The reason Rashi says is because you're embarrassing yourself in front of the community. In case you're not answered, they're going to make fun of you. Then look at who thinks he's trying to pray and he thinks he's important and that Hashem is going to listen, and he doesn't. But if he knows that he's like Yeshua ben Nun and Hashem will answer him, so then he would be allowed to do that. But otherwise, you shouldn't do it. Shenever, as it says, V'yam Hashem Yeshua, Hashem told Yeshua, Kum lach, get up. Meaning that your prayers were answered, and you can you should get up. It's okay. Don't get off the daven anymore. Why are you prostrating yourself? Why are you falling on your face? Then the Gemara says another statement of Rabbi Elazar. We're going to have a few statements of Rabbi Elazar over here. So the first statement was about person prostrating themselves in prayer. We're talking about praying and for the needs of the community. So it seems like maybe that's the connection here, that it's talking about the communal needs, rain and so on. So a person could only do that if he's on the level of Yeshua ben Nun to do such a public act. Rabbi Elazar says, a prominent person can't wear sackcloth, gird himself in sackcloth. Unless he will be answered to Yehoram ben Achav, like Yehoram, the son of Achav, who was actually a wicked person. But Shenemar, as it says, it was a famine in the days of King Yehoram. It says, when the king heard the words of the woman, basically the story was over there that there was a terrible famine. And one of the two women, they made a deal with each other. One of them says, we're going to eat your son today and my son tomorrow. And the first woman followed through. And then the next day, the other lady refused. So they went to the king. king finally woke up and realized how severe the famine was, that they're even eating their own children, and there was no food. And that's when he tore his clothing. It says, when the king heard the words of the woman, he's talking about King Yehoram. So when he heard such words of how they were, you know, so intense, the famine was so terrible. I guess the king himself didn't feel it. He had whatever he needed, I guess. But the people, the suffering that they were going through, eating their own children. So it says, Vayikra, God of, he tore his clothing, who he passed on the wall, Vayar ha'am, and the nation saw, they saw him wearing sackcloth. So basically, we the point over here is that person shouldn't do that unless he's in that league, unless he's someone who he'll be answered. If he's convinced that he'll be answered, like Yehoram ben Achav was answered. Now, because it does say that the famine subsided afterwards and so on after he prayed like that. Now there was food and so on. Rabbi Lazar says, another statement of Rabbi Lazar, not everyone is answered through this way of davening, nefila, prostrating oneself on the floor. Not everyone is answered through kriya, tearing their clothing. Right? We just had Yehoram tore his clothing, and Yeshua ben Nun, it says he was nafal al panecha. He fell on his face. So the Rebbe Lazar continues and he says, not everyone was answered this way, not everyone was answered that way. Each one has their way of davening. Moshe and Aaron ben Afila, it says Moshe and Aaron, they prostrated themselves. Yeshua Kalev, the Kriya, Yeshua and Kalev, they did the Kriya thing. They tore their clothes, they rended their clothes. Moshe and Aaron ben Afila, it says Moshe and Aaron, they prostrated themselves. As it says, they fell on their face in prayer. The story, the Yeshua Kalev, Bekriya, but Yeshua and Kalev in the same parsha, the parsha Shlach with the Meraglim, I believe. This is parsha Shlach. Double check. Nach Bamidbar 14. Yeah. So it's Parsha Shlach over here. So if you look, the pasuk says, they complained and they cried, and that night, and that's Tisha B'av, and Halavai, they said, if only we would have died in Egypt or in this desert. And why does Hashem bring us to the land to fall in Cherev and sword? They're going to be killed, and our wives, our children, they'll be hostages. And better if we return to Egypt. And they said, let's go back to Egypt. One said to the other, and Moshe and Aaron fell on their face in front of everyone. And the next pasuk says, "Yeshua ben Nun v'Kalev ben Yefunah v'Natarim es haaretz." The Yeshua ben Nun and Kalev, they were those that spied the land. So karu bigdayim, they tore their clothes. So in two psukim, one after the other, talking about the same story, we see that Moshe and Aaron, they fell on their face, they prostrated themselves, and Yeshua ben Nun and Kalev, they tore their clothes. So the pasuk, so Rebbe Lazar is comparing the two and saying, look at what happened over there. Not everyone is answered with kriya. Not everyone uses the nefila option. Each one has their way. Moshe and Aaron were nefila. They prostrated themselves. Yeshua Kalev, they rendered their clothing. Moshe and Aaron were nefila because it says Vayipol Moshe and Aaron al Paneim. It says this pasuk that I just read that they fell on their face. Moshe and Aaron. Yeshua Kalev b'kriya. Yeshua and Kalev, they tore their clothes. The Chsiv, as it says, Yeshua ben Nun and Kalev ben Yefunah karu b'gdayim. Yeshua ben Nun and Kalev, they tore their clothing, and that was basically the different situation. That different people had different strokes for different folks.
Rabbi,
and, yes,
it says over here that the Havaha Avid, that they did this and that they tore their clothing and they fell on their face.
Yeah, you're right, but you are ahead of me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is this
I'm,
Gemara.
I-
You're,
I'm
you're
cheating.
going.
I'm looking in Rabbi Stein's house.
You're reading the next piece. You're right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you got to that part.
This is Rabbi Elazar. Then the Gemara asks from Reb Zera. See now. Reb Zera, Vitem Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani, Reb Zera, and some say Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani asked this. They asked this on this teaching. They said, "I hava ksiv Yeshua keduka amrit." If it would say Yeshua, then fine. But it says the Yoshua. Hasher says the Yoshua. Now that it says the Yoshua, so what that means is like David had just told us, spilled the beans a little early, that they did both, and meaning Yeshua and Kalev actually did Kriya and Nefila. They fell on their face and they tore their clothes. And Rashi says an interesting thing. Rashi says that Yeshua and Kalev, the initial Gemara, the initial way, Lazar's way of understanding it, was that that Yeshua and Kalev, they only did Kriya, and Rashi says they weren't chashuv k'Moshe and Aaron, so therefore they wouldn't have been answered only with Kriya. And sounds like, it's not just a person's style, but like it's a certain prestige. Like Kriya is a lower level than Nefila al Panecha, Neifel al Panecha, than falling on one's face, which I guess makes sense. Falling on one's face is like you're doing a something more. Shows a certain level of connection to Hashem, a very high level of attachment to Hashem. But then the Gemara concludes and says the way the Gemara answers it is that they did both. So according to the conclusion of the Gemara, it doesn't necessarily mean that. You know what I mean? That was really in the Hava, I mean, the thought of the Gemara. You could say that. Then the way the Gemara seems to conclude, or at least the other opinions, that Yeshua and Kalev, they not only did Nefila, they also did Kriya. Maybe it doesn't matter if one is more chashuv, one is more, that Yeshua and Kalev are less than Moshe and Aaron. Maybe that's not necessarily the deciding factor. Again, sometimes you learn in Gemara, you don't know, not necessarily is the way you understood it the initial way is not the way the Gemara is concluding, because it was explaining Rabbi Elazar. The other view might hold differently. Yes, Moshe. Moshe?
No, Rabbi, I didn't ask anything.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Rabbi,
Ezra, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, my point was that if when you're doing Ishtar Chavaya, which is basically what Moshe and Aaron did, you're basically saying to Hashem, I'm basically nothing. What you can do Kriya standing up. It's not a big, it's not as showing that you're so lowly.
Yeah.
So for Yeshua to do it, I mean, the order may also have an effect here as well. With the fact that they said did this and he did that. So does that mean that Yeshua did the Kriya after he did the Ishtar Havaya?
You want to know which one he did first?
I mean, from an operational standpoint, you do Kriya first, then you would do Ishtar Havaya, because it's kind of hard to do it when you're prostrated to do Kriya. So, well,
it could be that he got up first and did it. It doesn't say that he didn't interrupt with getting up, but I guess that's a little hint that like he also and Yoshua ben Nun, in addition to doing the Nefila, he did Kriya. Does it sound like he did it in that order? I don't know if you can prove that he did it in that order, but I guess that would be like you're saying. Well, according to this, it means that he actually fell on his face first. If you want to say, and Yoshua ben Nun also did a Kriya. according to the simple reading, it would sound like maybe he did first the falling on his face, and afterwards he did the kriya, which I guess would mean he got up. Now, according to halacha, actually, it's interesting that kriya is done standing. In fact, if a person did kriya sitting, I don't think they're yaitza when it comes to avelos, when it comes to mourning. The law of kriya is done davka when standing. But I don't know if you can prove that he did which one he did first. So it could be as you're thinking. I'm just I don't know if you can prove either way. They're just learning from the Vav that he also did that. Doesn't mean he did it in that order. I don't know if you can take it to that extent that it's telling you the order.
Rabbi Steinsaltz says he did this and that. That is to say that they tore their clothing in addition to falling on their faces, making it sound like the falling on their faces was first, and the tearing of the clothing was in addition.
I don't know if that's a proof, but anyway, it could be. But it's, you know what I mean. It doesn't say which first. In addition, as you had eggs for breakfast, and I also had coffee. Does that mean I had my coffee after my eggs? You know what I mean? In addition to the eggs, I had coffee. Does that mean it was after? I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's a proof just because you say the word in addition. But okay. Anyway, the Gemara continues and says that another statement of Rabbi Elazar. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says, Rabbi Elazar said, "Loi hakol b'kima." Not everyone in the time of the Geula, not everyone is going to greet the Yidden the same. Not everyone will be standing. Loi hakol b'shachavaya. Not everyone will greet us bowing. Malachim b'kima. Says the kings will greet us standing, kima, and the sarim and princes, v'hishtachavoya, nobles, they will greet us bowing. Malachim b'kima, it says there's a similar idea, like you have these doing this way and those doing that way. We just said these did the kriya, these did the rending, those did the prostrating. So now Rabbi Elazar says when it comes to the coming of Mashiach, it says now different. Also, you have a similar thing. You have kings doing this; they'll do the standing up for us. And the sarim, the nobles, or the princes, they will, nobles. They will be they will do the hishtachavoya. They will do the bowing. Malachim Mekima of the Chsiv, as it says in the pasuk, that the kings will greet us standing. Koyamar Hashem Goyel Yisrael Kedoshai, the Redeemer of the Yidden and Kedoshai, His Holy One. Now we turn the page. Livzoi nefesh. Livzoi nefesh, to the degraded soul, lemesoyev goy, to the abhorred of nations, le'eved moishlim, to those that are ruled by servants, melachim yiru v'kamu, kings will see and they will stand up. The sarim b'shtachavoya, and the nobles will bow down. The chsiv, as it says, sarim v'yishtachavu, and the nobles will bow down. So that is the this pasuk here in this is the pasuk
Yeshaya, right?
in Yeshaya. Yes, it is 49.
Okay.
Yeshaya 49. Why doesn't that have the whole pasuk?
Rabbi, you were saying that this is the way that they'll greet.
I'm sorry. What did you say?
You're saying that this is the way they'll greet the Jews?
That's the way they're going to greet us when Mashiach comes. That
No,
even though
it says over here that they're going to worship Hashem by rising or bowing. This is worshiping Hashem, not greeting the Jews.
It's both. They're going to greet us and realize that the Eibishter is the
Okay.
because it's emphasizing the Yidden here. That in other words, what is it emphasizing here? That to the degraded soul, to the abhorred of nations, to those ruled by servants. They're talking about the Yidden. and to them, these nations are going to stand. These the kings are going to stand up. Right? What are all these words? It's all about the Yidden. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah, here he's filling in the blanks here. He says Rabbi Elazar says not all of the dignitaries will worship Hashem in the Messianic age by rising, and not all will do by bowing. Rather, the kings will serve Hashem by rising, and the ministers by bowing.
Okay, but the pasuk seems to emphasize that they're honoring the Yidden and they're doing it Laman Hashem. They're doing it for Hashem, but they're honoring us. That's the pasuk. That's what it says.
Okay.
To the Bezoy Nefesh, the Messiah Goy. It seems like if you want to translate the pasuk, that seems like what it's.
That's what Rashi says, Rabbi. Rashi follows you.
Right, exactly.
Follow him.
The Yisrael Habazuyim Hamusavim Ba'avadim Moishlim Behen. This is Rashi. You're right. Thank you. Rashi really says this. And he says in the next pasuk, the next Rashi, not everyone bekima lekras Yisrael lost Levi malachim yiru v'kamu sarm yishachu. Yeah, it's pretty clear in Rashi. Thank you, Ezra. So the Gemara continues and says, okay, so all of that's the same pasuk. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, the pasuk in Yeshaya. So it has the words after Malachim Yiru V'Kamu, the kings will get up, they'll honor us. So the Sarim right afterwards says Sarim Yishtachavu, and the nobles will bow. It does say Laman Hashem, so it is obviously for Hashem, but it's honoring the Yidden, as Rashi says. And Maskef lo Reb Zera, so Reb Zera asked Vitema Reb Shmuel bar Nachmeni. Some say Reb Shmuel bar Nachmeni, you have a ksiva Sarim Yishtachav Kiduka Amrit. If it says Sarim and the Sarim will bow, that would make it sound like you're saying. But Hashta the ksiv Sarim Biyishtachavu, the Sarim and they will bow. It sounds like they'll do two things. So Havaha of it. So it sounds like they did both. They're going to stand and they will bow. And so that's the similar line to what it said before about them arguing with Rabbi Elazar on the other thing, Reb Zera in the name of Reb Shmuel bar Nachmeni, and again it's Reb Zera in the name of Reb Shmuel bar Nachmeni with the extra vav that he says. You see that they're doing both. I'm Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok afani omer lo yakol oirav lo yakol simcha. It says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok says I also have a similar line that. It says, not everyone will merit the light, and not everyone merit the joy, the gladness in the world to come. The tzaddikim, it says, tzaddikim la'ira, the tzaddikim will merit the light. Yesharim l'simcha, but the upright, they'll merit the simcha, the joy. Tzaddikim la'ira, it says, tzaddikim will get the light. It says, or zaru ala tzaddik, the tzaddik gets light. Light is sown for the tzaddik. But yesharim simcha d'chsiv, the Yesharim get joy, as it says, Ola Yishrei Lev, Simcha for the upright of the heart. Yishrei Lev, Yashar is Yishrei Lev, the upright of the heart. They will get joy. Hadron Allah Me'emasai, may we return to you, Me'emasai, which is